Let us take up question number 21, which had appeared in Prelims 2023 Set A. Now, if you read this particular question is with reference to the Infrastructure Investment Trust. So, before discussing the answer to this particular question, let us try to understand as to why was this question asked in the Prelims 2023. We all know that the Government of India has launched National Monetization Pipeline. Under National Monetization Pipeline, the government is going to identify certain brownfield assets. Brownfield assets are basically those assets which are already created. So we are going to identify brownfield assets such as roads, railways, ports, airports, and so on. And these brownfield assets we are going to monetize. By monetizing these brownfield assets, the government is going to get money. This money, the government is going to use it to create new infrastructure projects. One way of monetizing the brownfield assets is through Infrastructure Investment Trust. That's the first reason. Secondly, the National Monetization Pipeline is under the control of Niti Aayog. So when Niti Aayog had released the concept paper on National Monetization Pipeline, the Niti Aayog had highlighted that the Finance Act of 2021 brought invits, that is Infrastructure Investment Trust, under the ambit of the SARFAESI Act, which means the Finance Act 2021 said that we will consider the Infrastructure Investment Trust as borrowers under the SARFAESI Act. However, the Niti Aayog went on to also highlight that Infrastructure Investment Trust are recognized as borrowers under SARFAESI Act, but right now they are not recognized as borrowers under Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. So accordingly, the Niti Aayog recommended that the IBC has to be amended so that we should start recognizing invits as borrowers under the IBC as well. So it's the latest development. It was in this particular context, this question about Infrastructure Investment Trust was asked. So let us try to first understand what are Infrastructure Investment Trust. How are we going to monetize the brownfield assets? That is the assets which we have already created. To understand the working mechanism of Infrastructure Investment Trust, I will give an example. The example from the perspective of NHAI, that is National Highway Authority of India. So we'll understand as to how will the NHAI monetize the already built national highways through invits. So here, as you can see, let's say NHAI, National Highway Authority of India, has built a national highway with an initial investment of rupees 100 crores. For sake of example, let's say National Highway Authority of India has built the Delhi-Agra National Highway already. It has already made investment. Now this investment is now locked up. How can we monetize this national highway? That is where the Infrastructure Investment Trust comes into play. How? Let's see that. So here the NHAI will transfer the already completed national highway, which is this Delhi-Agra National Highway, through a Infrastructure Investment Trust which is owned by NHAI itself. So NHAI will create a trust called as NHAI invit. To this particular invit, it will transfer the national highway. Then what happens? This Infrastructure Investment Trust will then raise money from the investors. How will it raise money? One, you can see it will raise money through the issuance of Infrastructure Investment Trust units. What are these units? Let's say there is a company. This company wants to raise share capital. To raise share capital, the company issue shares. I buy shares of the company. When I buy shares of the company, I become the owner of the company to the extent of the shareholding. Same way, here the infrastructure investment trust issues infrastructure investment trust units. And let's say this unit is bought by me. In this case, I would own the assets owned by this infrastructure investment trust. For example, it's like saying I bought a unit issued by this infrastructure investment trust. This infrastructure investment trust owns the Delhi Agra National Highway. So indirectly, it's as good as saying I own a part of National Highway in India itself. So that is one way where this trust can raise money. Apart from that, the trust can also raise money through issuance of bonds in the capital market. So as we can see, we had an initial investment of 100 crores in building this national highway, and this infrastructure investment trust has raised 200 crores. Then what happens? It will transfer 100 crores to NHAI. So once it transfers 100 crores to NHAI, can I say that NHAI has been able to recover the investment which has made in building this national highway? It has got additional 100 crores now. This 100 crores NHAI can use it to build a new national highway somewhere. Now, for example, we are building the Delhi Mumbai National Highway. So, this 100 crores NHAI can use it to build the Delhi Mumbai National Highway, right? So, now if you see, this infrastructure investment trust might have some additional 100 crores left with it after paying 100 crores to NHAI. What is it going to do with this money? Let's understand that. So, here, whatever money it has, this money it will in turn invest in infrastructure projects. For example, it can buy shares of infrastructure companies, it can lend loans to the infrastructure companies, it can invest in government securities. All of these things it can do. Apart from that, this infrastructure investment trust will manage the national highway which NHAI has transferred to it, which means in this case, this trust will manage the Delhi Agra National Highway, which I discussed. When I say manage, it means it will erect a toll. By erecting a toll, now this infrastructure investment trust will earn toll revenue. So, here basically infrastructure investment trust is pooling money from different investors and then investing in infrastructure projects. So, can I say it is almost similar to a mutual fund company? A mutual fund company also pools in money from different investors, and the pooled money is in turn invested in shares, bonds, and so on. Same thing is happening here, except the fact that the underlying assets are different. Underlying assets in this case are the infrastructure projects. So, when it makes investment in all of these projects, invit will earn money in the form of toll revenue. It might earn money in the form of interest on the loans. But here, this is not its own money, it's the money which it has pulled in from the investors. So, I need to get my returns on this investment, right? How will I get returns? In this case, what happens is this infrastructure investment trust will distribute the profits earned among these investors. In what form? The form in which I will get the returns would be in the form of dividend, or I might get a return in the form of interest which this particular company is earning. So that is how investors do get benefit when they make investment in infrastructure investment trust. So as you can see, it's a win-win situation because on one hand, NHAI is getting money which it can in turn use it for building new assets. We as investors are also getting benefit in the form of dividend, in the form of interest, and so on. So keeping this knowledge as a background, let us solve the question asked in this year prelims examination. Okay. If you read the first statement here, it says interest income from the deposits in infrastructure investment trust distributed to the investors is exempted from the tax. The investment holders as such, they do not get any kind of tax exemption on the interest which they earn. So obviously the statement which is given here is incorrect. So both the dividend as well as interest which I would earn as a investor of an infrastructure investment trust, on both of these two I will be required to pay the tax. So that is why the first statement is incorrect. Look at the second statement. Invits are recognized as borrowers under SARFAESI Act 2002, which we discussed is correct, and the same was introduced to the Finance Act of 2021. So if you read all the options here, the right answer to this particular question is statement 1 is incorrect while the statement 2 is correct. So as far as this particular question is concerned, I would consider this particular question on the tougher side, because normally when we approach the civil service examination, we don't get into nitty-gritties of taxation on dividends, interest, and so on. That is why this particular question was slightly on the tougher side.